It's very easy to write off Omori. It's one of those mixes of surreal RPG throwbacks and psychological horror that has risen in popularity a lot in the last decade or so. It's kind of impressive just how much this little subgenre, or whatever you want to call it, has grown. And from the get-go, Omori was going to be roped into that stigma without a second thought. It was going to be compared to something. But as everyone begins the inevitable discussion of Omori's lasting legacy, whether or not it's the next Undertale or Yume Nikki, whether or not it'll cultivate a collective of supporters to rival those games' fan bases, I think its most meaningful qualities don't really match up with that discourse. Omori has the potential to take off, sure, but its advertised tones are kind of a red herring, at least when taken individually. It's not just a surreal RPG throwback. It's not just psychological horror. Omori's not as simple as that at all, but its individual components ultimately work together to create something holistically defined. Because Omori has something very important to say. It interprets the past as something essential. It's a story where the lingering effects of what occurred long ago still shape us, influencing how we live and what we do. Through joy and anguish, coming to terms with our own history is a human act, something that can be incredibly arduous. We all live through these feelings differently, but Omori is a reminder that regardless of how these moments played out, as good or as bad as they are, forgetting them simply doesn't make sense. After their friend Basil disappears, the main cast of Omori set out to find him, exploring a light-hearted world and interacting with plenty of strange but creatively composed characters. Things start humbly enough at a forest park that the characters visit. Right off the bat, it's imaginative, giving the player plenty of moments to laugh even when the game throws a more intimidating or complex obstacle in their way. From these humble first impressions, there's a very homely vibe in Omori, and it makes diving into its world feel incredibly welcoming. Even when thrust into turmoil in the game's battles, which are illustrated in a rough coloring book design, Omori takes that same homeliness in stride, feeling silly in ways that are built to make you laugh. The art direction might appear to simply be for looks, but it also perfectly fits the youthful struggles the characters endure. The amount of detail is so apparent, from the characters' skill animations to the empowering team-up attack. The graphic direction of Omori is so charming that it's difficult to not crack a smile, even when staring down an angry bear or colossal plant creature. The little moments of creativity, like Hiro's fear of spiders limiting his skill set when faced against spider-like enemies, are appreciated and build up the cast's presence. As the main story moves onward, battles become sillier, but also knit more tightly. The characters attune to each other's personalities, and their movesets grow in strength and complexity. Like in any great RPG, your party becomes a key component to both gameplay and narrative, and Omori does a fantastic job at making its cast so likable and worth giving a damn about. There's a playfulness to Omori's world. Most of the fights are fantastical. The characters explore a world of escapist surrealism, capped off with that crayon-style art direction that makes the entire space appear like it's from the mind of a kid. That's something that Omori really accomplishes with its universe. The simplicity of youth is fully alive as characters encounter or even befriend things as abstract as a sentient planetoid, as cartoonish as a shark CEO. That optimism is core to Omori's style. Even in the face of danger, working together and helping each other out feels rewarding. Making friends is something so many of us at least wanted to do when we were kids, and it's something, in retrospect, that brought value to our lives. With these thoughts, Omori wants the player to feel the same kind of optimistic comfort in its wild universe. It all feels nostalgic, encouraging the player to revisit that time of social innocence. It's a joyous, playful romp through an incredibly memorable world. But the youthful surrealism is only one part of Omori. The other part has the player abandoning the Omori-named protagonist and taking control of another character in a suburban town called Faraway. In these segments, your party members have aged several years. Kel is pursuing basketball, Aubrey becomes a tough delinquent, and the main character is set to move away to another town in just a few days. These characters show their changes from the fantastical world in pretty overt ways, because all things considered, this real world is meant to be this way. People change. They reject things in the past that may not serve their current incarnation's values. The friendly unity between the characters is replaced by caution, as the cast is forced to confront reality in ways that can feel both stressful and comforting. In these faraway town segments, the cast undergoes that change. From childish pretend to awkward adolescence, the reshaping of context is one part of what makes Omori's narrative so incredibly fascinating. Growing up is not easy, and Omori makes it clear that the events of the past can come with a lot of baggage in tow. But even that isn't Omori's full story. Faraway Town isn't only there to provide that grounded, homely vibe, but in an almost devious way, It throws incredibly dark imagery right in the player's face. This is because the protagonist of Omori is haunted by, quite literally, something. The horrific nightmare creatures that appear feel ripped straight from an internet scary story, personifying a number of phobias and keeping both the character and the player on edge. However, while these beings are incredibly unsettling, Omori's penchant for the under-the-skin macabre isn't anything too new to this type of game. In fact, if you're a dedicated fan of this genre, it may come across as predictable. And the developers knew this, because Omori's dark undertones are advertised on the game's Steam page and prominently featured in promo media. It's practically sensationalized. But at the same time, I think it's unfair to say that the game coasts on this style of horror, because Omori has far more to say in its story than its initial impressions might imply. Its exploration of grief, repression, and trauma runs deep, even if the imagery can seem a bit predictable when taken at face value. The hauntings are there, yes, but they add a striking parallel to the youthful spirit of the game's other side. And I use the other side phrasing intentionally because the darker elements of Omori do feel like their own entity. On one hand, you have the whimsical childhood, and on the other hand, the struggling adolescence. But this third side, the story behind the shadows that haunt the main character, it occupies a kind of limbo between the other two. I can't go into enormous detail without spoiling the game rotten, but what I can say is that what is tormenting Omori's lead is the tissue that connects the story together. Even beyond the game's transition to Faraway Town, the lighthearted adventures are punctuated with unsettling detours as well. The horror never entirely dissipates, lingering in the back of your head and never fully letting go. As I said, this isn't anything too original, but once you examine what these moments actually represent, Omori becomes so much more than the sum of its parts. This third side is composed of emotions that weigh you down hard, but they're also ethereal. They fade away as the adventure moves forward, but grow in influence once the player is hurled back into Faraway. Dynamic and brooding, these feelings always manage to push through whatever piece you can find in Omori. I mentioned earlier that the town segments have the characters interacting with their memories in their own ways. Some approach them with optimism, some confront them with anger. The protagonist's interactions, however, are far more overt, carried by the somethings that rattle them. Many games have attempted to personify and give faces to depression, anxiety, or mental turmoil, and at first glance, Omori stays the tried and true path. But the monsters fit into the memory theme. Just as the characters are fighting their own figurative demons, the main character is forced to fight their own demons, ones that are fueled by negative emotions. And the game's final act is an incredible performance in not just showing these negative emotions at their most feverish, but also the rippling effects they cast upon a person and their life. A lot needs to be done to overcome these toxic feelings, but Omori wants the player to fully understand what can be done when they face them. Regardless of what the response is, something will happen. That's the power that memories have over humans. Because Omori is a game about memories. It's a story about how even in their fleeting nature, things from the past still exist in the minds of many people, affecting the things that they do. Memories can be joyous and worth treasuring at every moment, but they can also be hurtful and eat away at our psyches. But we all must cope with the fact that these things happened, and of course, we cope with the pain in our own ways. Omori dashes back and forth between escapism, isolation, neglect, and confrontation, piecing together the fractured narrative and the characters who give it life. The fantastical world of youth is joyous escapism, but it's paralleled by the reality that the characters must face when they're older. The two scenarios work together to reinforce the game's theme of memories and their power over people. You can't have a present without a past. And when the protagonist must face the something that torments them, the game's potential is realized. The creatures tie the scenarios together, telling the player that these memories have weight, and what you do in response to them can change outcomes in drastic ways. The past can't be changed, but it can change us. This theme persists so much throughout. It's the structure to the game's narrative essence, and that commitment to thematic artistry makes Omori, fittingly, a game that's impossible to forget.